Welcome to the lost city of Anor Londo, chosen undead.
Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and in this video we're going to take a look at the character Gwyndolin from Dark Souls, the Dark Sun, protector of the forsaken city of Anor Londo, and master, if not necessarily founder, of the Darkmoon Blades. And we'll start with his name and titles. Gwyndolin, as with his sister and potentially his brother, the firstborn, nameless king, derives his name from his father, Gwyn, itself seeming to stem from the Welsh and Celtic Gwyn, meaning, more or less, white. The most interesting part about Gwyndolin's name would have to be the connection to Gwyn, so let's move on to his titles. Dark Sun, Gwyndolin, and that is typically how he is referred to, despite all the connections to Darkmoon. Though keep in mind Darkmoon is one word, whereas Dark Sun is not. Gwyndolin is referred to both as the Dark Sun and the Dark Moon deity. The moon aspects of Gwyndolin are easy to explain, at least. The power of the moon was strong in Gwyndolin, and thus he was raised as a daughter. Gwyndolin was raised like a daughter through the aura of the moon, and was said to behave like a sullen, brooding goddess. Whilst the sun and moon being used to represent the masculine and feminine respectively is nothing new, it does beg the question just why they thought Gwyndolin's affinity to the moon was important enough to raise him that way. As it happens, the reversal ring in Dark Souls 3 is acquired within the Darkmoon tomb, which could suggest that Gwyndolin has discarded it at some point, as otherwise you'd expect him to drop it, no? As for Dark Sun, is that a roundabout way to refer to the moon, or just attributing Gwyndolин's relationship to Gwyn? Indeed, we don't know if Gwyndolin himself assumed the title Dark Sun, or if it was granted to him. That said, we do know that Gwyndolin has a deep adoration of the sun. Whether that is more symbolic or a literal adoration of his father and older brother, though, is left intentionally vague. But we can assume that Gwyndolin, at the very least, has a respect for his father's wishes, faithfully guarding his tomb and forsaken city, whilst overseeing the punishment of those who offend the gods via his covenant. The Darkmoon deity is Gwyn's lastborn and a legitimate god, but also a moon sorcerer. Whilst the sun and its lightning is absolutely associated with miracles and Gwyn, the moon is often associated more with sorcery, the distinction between the two sometimes being small, but always being important. This connection between the moon and sorcery or magic is a trend that spans from Dark Souls through to Demon Souls, not to mention Bloodborne and even Elden Ring. Indeed, whilst fighting Gwyndolin, he appears to use spells more akin to sorcery and soul arrows than any miracle we're used to. Now, judging from what happened to Gwyn's firstborn, could it be that the Lord of Sunlight didn't wish for Gwyndolin to take a similar path, and that is why Gwyndolin was raised according to his affinity with the moon? Or was it the other way around? Gwyndolin came to be prior to the Nameless King's name being struck from the annals. Ergo, Gwyn had no need for another son, another heir to his sunlight. Another matter up for debate is just what is the deal with Velka and Gwyndolin, Velka being the black-haired goddess of sin who oversees the guilty who shall one day face judgment at the hands of the Darkmoon Blades. Was this initially Velka's covenant and duty, only for Gwyndolin to usurp her? Do they perhaps work in tandem? Or is Gwyndolin in fact Velka? Or is Velka an illusion created by Gwyndolin, as the avatar of Gwynevere that is encountered in Anor Londo turned out to be? One interesting correlation between the two is that the Darkmoon Catalyst is used to cast sorceries using one's faith, whereas Velka's talisman is quite the reverse, using miracles with one's intelligence. It is this which leads me to think perhaps Gwyndolin usurped Velka, potentially banishing her, along with some of her followers, to the Painted World. Even the goddess of sin must be judged, if she were offending the gods, no? Maybe Velka was the mother of Priscilla, and The creation of this abomination, as the game refers to Priscilla, was a sin so black that Gwyndolin banished the both of them. Or perhaps Gwyn banished them and then gave leadership of the Darkmoon Blades to Gwyndolin himself. Well, who knows, maybe Velka wasn't the mother of Priscilla, but the mother of Sulyvahn, a sorcerer who apes the Darkmoon Blade miracle via sorcery. There's your crazy theory for the day. Either way, Velka's pardoners are, at least, still active. So either they are unaware of Velka's fate, or the two gods work in tandem, or Velka's just working behind the scenes and Gwyndolин's, well, also behind the scenes, as he doesn't really like showing his face much, does he? Gwyndolin is aware of his frail and repulsive appearance, and thus created the illusion of his sister, Gwynevere, to act as mouthpiece and to greet the chosen undead, amongst other things. It seems almost certain that Gwynevere herself is real, if unaccounted for, that Gwyndolin simply chose to use her image, potentially exaggerating her size for the sake of grandeur. Whilst the possibility exists that there never was a Gwynevere, and her entire creation was a fabrication of Gwyndolin, I don't think that's very likely. When the chosen undead encounters Gwyndolin, they're given the choice to join the Darkmoon Covenant, and punish those who have offended the gods and likewise trespass into the world of others. The chosen undead also has the option to strike down the Dark Sun, facing him in combat. Which leads us to Dark Souls 3, the Moon City, constructed seemingly on the ruins of Anor Londo, becoming Gwyndolin's kingdom. These moon-worshipping nobles were eventually, it seems, seduced by Sulyvahn, an entity born and raised in the Painted World, yet with a little use for his homeland, having not yet experienced loss. Whether he was seeking revenge for Velka or had some other intent in mind, Sulyvahn eventually became the ruler of Irithyll, assuming the title of Pontiff. When faced in combat, the sorcerer wields power representing the judgment of the moon, but is, in fact, closer to magic than a miracle. In other words, Sulyvahn is using an imitation of Darkmoon Blade created via sorcery. The game remarks this reflects his true nature, which is why I mentioned that possible, although probably unlikely connection to Velka, who, as mentioned, was all about that intelligence. One of Sulyvann's more distasteful acts, of which there are legion, was introducing Aldrich back to the city, the saint's place of birth. There, the man-eater, fed up with feasting on men, decided to consume gods. Whilst it is hinted that he may have consumed Nito and Priscilla, or at least their souls, he is in the midst of consuming the Dark Sun alive, when the Ashen One stumbles upon him at last. So, if Gwyndolin was killed by the chosen undead, how can he be here? After all, every choice you make is canon for the most part. There is no canon ending to any of the Dark Souls games. Whatever path you took is canon. Souls can be split, and Gwyndolin is a master of illusion, so that is one option. He either faked his death or split his soul. But another is that the chosen undead left him alive, but in a crippled, impotent state, greatly weakened, and thus easy prey for Aldrich all those years later. Of course, if the chosen undead decided to leave Gwyndolin be, then he would be hale, healthy, and ripe for consumption by the saint. Either way, Gwyndolin is alive during the act. Aldrich took pleasure in eating people alive, judging from his rings. And as you can no doubt imagine, a god, even a frail one such as Gwyndolin, would have a constitution beyond mortals and would no doubt last quite long before expiring. Once Aldrich is put down, nothing of Gwyndolin is left, save for, in the unused content, his ruined finger, which could have been delivered to the Darkmoon Company captain, Yorshka. Whilst she refers to Gwyndolin as her brother, it is rather unlikely they are biologically related, at least as siblings. Gwyndolin was Gwyn's last-born, and Yorshka is absolutely younger than Gwyndolin, being young enough that she doesn't know the meaning behind the vengeful Darkmoon Blade miracle's tale. She is also a crossbreed, the only other crossbreed we know like her being Priscilla. This has led some to speculate that Yorshka is the offspring of Priscilla and Gwyndolin, who then told her he was in fact her brother, Gwyn her father. Then again, Yorshka's use of the words brother and father could be less biological and more in the style of referring to a priest as father. There is honestly quite a lot to unpack when it comes to Gwyndolin. I haven't even touched upon the fact that he seems to have snakes for legs. You'd think that's rather important, and yet it is never really brought up, despite snakes and serpents playing quite a big role in the Dark Souls world. But you might speculate that perhaps Shrampt or Karth or someone like them had a role there. Maybe they cursed Gwyndolin before he was even born for reasons unknown. Seath is another one you could point the finger at. After all, he wasn't above a little experimentation and creating abominations. Just look at the Pisarca, Gwynevere's handmaidens, transformed into nightmarish beasts. Just as with all myths, there are many gaps surrounding Gwyndolin. But that's the fun part, right? We fill those gaps in ourselves. So, what do you think about Gwyndolin? Do you think it's a shame he didn't quad-wield Moonlight Greatswords with his snake legs? I do. And even if he's not the most benevolent of characters, there are certainly traits to admire about the Darkmoon deity, his adherence to his duty, despite being the last god of Anor Londo. And even more so, his fate is one of the more unfortunate and lamentable ones in the franchise. Being slowly eaten alive in the despoiled halls of your father and family is not an enviable way to go.
What you saw under light of the dark moon shall haunt you forever.